Hi, my name's Davina, and today we're talking about wildlife conservation. In the UK, we have some amazing wildlife. Everything from tiny birds the size of a pine cone to huge sharks the size of a double-decker bus. And you've probably seen lots of wildlife around your garden or green space. And I bet you can mention most of them by name. Barn owl, red fox, or common frog perhaps. But did you know that some of our most familiar wildlife is under threat? In some cases, they can't find enough to eat, and so they have to travel further to find it. In other cases, they struggle to find somewhere to set up home and have a family. And that's where we can help. Conservation is defined as the study of the loss of Earth's biological diversity and the ways that that loss can be prevented. And biodiversity is another word we hear a lot. It essentially means that the greater variety of life on Earth, the healthier our planet can be. And so we have to do everything we can to protect those species who are most at risk, so that future generations can enjoy them too. Most people know what a worm is. Most healthy gardens are full of them. But do you know what a slow worm is? Well, to begin with, they're not worms. They're not snakes either. They're legless lizards. They live mainly in grasslands and occasionally in gardens, especially those with a warm compost heap. But don't worry, they're shy and totally harmless to humans. The males are a browny bronze colour. The females have a dark stripe down their back. They're most active at dusk and during the day bask in whatever sunshine they can find to stay warm. They eat slow-moving prey, such as slugs and snails and the oin spider. And if attacked by, say, a cat, they can suddenly shed their tail. But that's not the coolest thing about them. They're what's called ovoviviparous, which means they hatch their eggs internally and then give birth to young. And I think that's pretty awesome. But they need our help because the grasslands that they rely on are disappearing. So from reptiles to amphibians. Now most people think that toads and frogs live in water. But the truth is they only use ponds and puddles to lay their eggs in. They live in mainly woodland and long grass. Take the common toad. This is the more warty cousin of the common frog. It can be identified by a golden eye and a horizontal eye slit. They like to breed in deeper bodies of fresh water, such as farm ponds and reservoirs. Unfortunately, these habitats are in decline. They lay their eggs in strings, where the frogs lay in clusters. They have browny olive skin, though the females have more of a reddish colour. The skin is dry and it emits toxins, so most predators leave them alone because they simply don't taste good. So it's best not to touch them. They're bigger than frogs, at 4 inches long, and they hibernate in the winter. And they like to choose a dry place, like under a stone. They use their sticky tongues to grab their prey, such as slugs and occasionally mice. In spring, when they wake up, they can often travel long distances to get to their breeding ponds. And that can be over walls and across roads. So in March, look out for the toads on the roads. Some of you might have read Wind in the Willows, so you'll be very familiar with Toad of Toad Hall and one of his friends, Ratty the water rat. But did you know that Ratty was actually a water vole? Water voles live in bodies of water such as this river, where they feed on grasses and herbs that grow on the bank. Once abundant in the UK, they are now one of our most threatened native animals. Habitat loss is a major concern for our water voles. Remarkably, scientists in Glasgow have discovered big populations of water voles living far away from water. We call this a fossorial lifestyle. More on that later. Water voles have browny black fur on their tail, paws and ears, and a rounder nose than their cousin the brown rat. They live for 5 or 6 months and have litters of 5 young, which are born in March in underground chambers on the riverbank. Often these chambers are partially underwater, and that protects them from their arch enemy, the American mink. So we've talked about reptiles, amphibians and mammals. But one of our most iconic species in Scotland is the golden eagle. The golden eagle is one of our top predators on our Scottish mountainsides. They hunt mainly rabbits and hare and occasionally take young foxes and deer. They live mainly in the northwest of Scotland, but there's a fantastic project in the southeast of Scotland which are doing great work to increase the small population there. More on that later. Golden eagles pair for life, and they live on rocky cliffs and make large nests called eyries. They hatch on average 2 eggs every March, and they can be identified by their dark feathers and golden head. However, the juveniles often have white patches on their wings, which can cause confusion compared to the common buzzard, although the common buzzard is a much smaller bird, whose wingspan might only be 1 metre wide, where the golden eagle can be as much as 2 metres wide.
So there is a great deal that we can do to help protect those vulnerable species, and the law is on our side. The most key piece of legislation is the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. This is the primary legislation which protects animals, plants and habitats in the UK. It's a complicated piece of legislation. It applies to terrestrial environments and inshore waters. It involves a large number of offences in relation to the killing and taking of wild birds, other animals and plants, and there are various sections to it, or schedules, which categorise the species. The level of protection given to a species depends on the schedule under which it's listed. Water voles and their habitats are protected under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981. They are also a priority species in the UK. Water voles have very strict habitat preferences. They prefer this type of habitat, known as riparian. Unfortunately, riparian habitats have been declining since the 1900s due to changes in land use and intensive farming methods. I've already spoke about the discovery of a large population of water voles in Glasgow living far away from water, and scientists believe that the loss of the habitats, the river habitats, has contributed to these water voles moving into the grasslands there. Water voles are also vulnerable to climate change. Being river dwellers, they're vulnerable to both drought and flooding, which can of course destroy their homes. Their habitats are important to us humans too though, because riparian areas store water and they absorb energy from the water during flood events, so they could become increasingly valuable to us humans in the future. Pollution is also an issue in the rivers. As we know, plastic is a problem. However, we must also consider fertilisers and pesticides which may leak from surrounding agricultural land either side of the river. American mink poses a serious threat to water voles. It is thought that minks escaped from fur farms in the 1950s. And in places like Glasgow, predators there may be fox and cat. Living so close to humans as water voles do, they must always suffer some level of human disturbance, not least of all from development and redevelopment of the land in the countryside. However, in places such as parks and gardens, they're often misidentified as the brown rat and poisoned in error. So what can we do? In cases of housing development, water voles can be what's called displaced, where the home burrows are blocked off and the water voles are encouraged to use burrows further downstream. However, water voles are notoriously loyal to their home burrows and resist displacement. Occasionally, water voles can be captured and removed to other sites. These are known as receptor sites. However, receptor sites are very difficult to find. They have to be carefully selected where no water voles are currently present. However, existing colonies of water voles should be nearby to support the new colony. However, removing water voles from their origins can isolate other populations of water voles, which can cause further problems. There's much to consider. Species protecting and monitoring takes the form of field surveys, where conservationists search suitable habitats for field signs such as feeding behaviour and poo. They also do capture, mark and recapture techniques, where individuals are captured, weighed, measured, sexed and marked, and then released back into their environment without any harm. This can be a very important technique in monitoring populations. The golden eagle is listed in Schedule 1 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 and the Nature Conservation Scotland Act. It is also included on the amber list of UK birds of conservation concern. It's also on the Scottish biodiversity list. Conservation-wise, forestry poses the greatest threat to the habitat of the golden eagle. Tree planting on previously open ground reduces the amount of prey available to the golden eagle, such as rabbits and hare. Prey abundance is also affected by climate change, such as flooding events, but scientists also believe that extreme weather events will become more commonplace in the future, and there will be a higher frequency of cold weather events in higher altitudes, such as the Scottish mountains. Golden eagles have no natural predator, but man poses a serious threat to our golden eagles. Conservationists believe our wind farms, for instance, may pose a threat to our golden eagles. However, studies are taking place right now to establish the level of that threat in places such as Arran on the west coast of Scotland. Golden eagles are heavily persecuted by man through nest robbing and shooting, but most especially through poisoning, and there is strong evidence to connect poisoning events to land managed for grouse hunting, though this is hotly disputed by shooting estates. Translocation is one technique used by conservationists to distribute the population of golden eagles. However, large territories must be sought for this, with enough prey and places free from human disturbance to be most suitable for the golden eagles. As I touched upon earlier, there's a fantastic project in the southeast of Scotland who are working hard to increase the small population which has clung on there for many decades while others disappeared. In order to boost the number of eagles in the south, eaglets are relocated from areas further north and brought to custom-built aviaries at a confidential location in the Preece and Galloway Hills, and after a brief stay they're released into the southern uplands to interact with the few resident eagles there and provide more incentive for wandering birds to remain in the south. These birds and other monitoring programmes are monitored using satellite tagging, most especially, and also ringing to monitor birds across the UK. Some species are so precious and so protected that you need a licence to work with them. Licences are granted to individuals or organisations for certain specific purposes, actions that would otherwise constitute an offence against a protected species. Bats, badgers and our water voles are all examples of protected species in the UK. A government organisation called Nature Scot issues these licences, and there are many hundreds of organisations, charities, community groups and ecologists who work daily to help protect our most vulnerable animals and plants from harm. However, wildlife crime remains a major concern, with a great many animals suffering at the hands of humans for profit or just for fun. But there is always hope, and there are thousands of hard-working conservation teams and volunteers working all over the UK to create new habitats, or perhaps protect the ones which are still hanging on. Research is also vital, and with increased interest from the public in general, so-called citizen science is now a key part of helping us understand the natural world better, so we can make the necessary changes. Frog Life are a charity who champion all our native amphibians and reptiles. Their work includes funding research, improving habitats, and public engagement to help educate people on the threats faced by these creatures. One of the projects they help set up is Toads on the Roads. Remember I talked about this earlier? Toads face many dangers getting back to their breeding ponds, including crossing busy roads. So toad patrols are organised and coordinated by Frog Life volunteers who patrol known crossing sites and help the toads get across safely. This project receives no funding and relies on the Tuppence a Toad appeal donations. Another great organisation doing really important work is the Mammal Society. They also help with conservation projects and public engagement. They have also launched a new free app that you can download and record any sightings you see of mammals when you're out and about, or just the ones you see in your garden. It's a great example of citizen science, and it is a really important tool in helping them build up a picture of where there are mammals and, more importantly, where there are not.
So I hope you enjoyed my talk today about wildlife and conservation. There is so much more to learn and so many more animals and plants that need our help. So if you're interested in getting involved with wildlife, why not search online for projects near you? Together, we really can make a difference.